Thank you for joining us for the October GATE Equity webinar, where we explore topics related to equity in graduation. This webinar will be recorded, and we're working on our process for making our webinars ADA compliant. So stay tuned for those recordings. The PowerPoint is posted on OSPI's GATE Equity webinar page. So if you want to follow along, you just have to go to OSPI's website and click on that. I'm Kelcey Anderson, OSPI graduation and equity program supervisor. Today's topic is Rethinking Discipline, a systems approach to supporting positive behavior. I'm joined today by Josh Lynch, our OSPI Student Discipline, Behavior, and Readiness to Learn Program Supervisor, and Kelcey Schmitz, OSPI Integrated Student Support and Center for the Improvement of Student Learning. We're also featuring Battleground Public Schools to talk about their journey with discipline. We're glad you all could be here today to share your experience. We're really lucky to have you. GATE's making friends and teaming up this month to bring you some really great presentations. This is the beginning of a 3-part webinar series. Later today, Josh and Kelcey will be presenting in another great webinar connecting research, policy, and practice in student discipline, where they'll be previewing the first new discipline training module. That's at 3:30 today, so definitely check that out. Our special education department is also putting together a webinar October 25th for special education considerations. Here you'll get a view of what discipline looks like from a regulatory lens. We'll copy and paste these webinar registration links in the chat if you'd like to register now for these really awesome webinars. Superintendent Reichdahl's K-12 vision has 3 phases, each lasting 2 years, from small improvements to a full redesign of the K-12 education system. And those are our goals. According to a 2014 analysis done by the Washington State Institute for Public Policy, we know that each graduate creates benefits of more than $500,000 in higher earnings, as well as societal savings in areas such as healthcare and unemployment compared to students that don't graduate. Underpinning graduation are key intermediate measures, including attendance, discipline, and 9th grade course failure. Today, we're focusing on suspensions and expulsions. And we're also looking at, for today, to catch you up on recent legislation and OSPI implementation, get you some practical advice on systems change from Battleground, and give you some resources to help you along the way. And we have so much good stuff. I'm going to let Josh tell you a little bit more.
Thank you, Kelcey. So I'm just going to go over a lot of information related to changes in student discipline at the Washington state level that's occurred over the last few years. And this is part of a larger effort in rethinking school or student discipline at the national level as well as the state level. So these changes in legislation and laws are part of an ongoing rethinking of the process of student discipline, but laws certainly don't come out of thin air, and I just won't be getting into the details behind that today. Maybe this afternoon you'll tune in for more information at the webinar. But for the 2015-16 school year, discipline data in Washington state, we saw decreases, and particularly significant decreases in the use of long-term suspension and expulsions. However, racial disparities in Washington data persist over time. For more information on the data, you can follow the link there and look at the discipline performance indicator as well as all the other performance indicators that OSPI releases. One of the most recent pieces of legislation impacting student disciplines laws in Washington state was House Bill 1541 that passed in the 2016 regular session. This was based on recommendations from the Educational Opportunity Gap Oversight and Accountability Committee. And what you're looking at on the slide here is all of the comprehensive recommendations that form the different parts of that massive bill. So the first one there in red is, and this is from the intent section of this bill, is related to part 1 on disproportionality in student discipline. So some of the highlights that made significant changes in the laws are listed there on this slide. And the intended impact of this law, as well as prior bill that passed in 2013 has been consistent with research and best practices in discipline, and has the intent of limiting the use of exclusionary discipline practices, minimizing the impact of exclusionary discipline when it is used as a last resort, and reducing disparities in the administration of student discipline. As an example of some of the changes that have occurred in the last few years, when looking at the maximum length of time that a student could be excluded for certain exclusion types, you can see from the chart here that before 2013, there was a lot of lack of clarity in the laws about the maximum length of time that a student could be excluded. And for expulsion, the maximum time was indefinite. So with the latest bill, House Bill 1541, the maximum length of time that a student could be excluded for long-term suspension, expulsion, is now at the length of an academic term. There has also been other limitations and additional due process in laws that apply to long-term suspensions and expulsions and exclusions in general. And so we're starting to see an effect when we look at the data. As I mentioned, there has been a significant decrease in the use of long-term suspension expulsion, and a lot of that can certainly be attributed to the changes in law at the state level, but also a shift in thinking around discipline as well. Part of 1541 directed OSPI to develop discipline training modules to support implementation of district discipline policies and procedures under Washington state law. The audience, according to statute, for this training is any school or district staff who interact with students. So anyone from the superintendent to the paraeducator in the building. The training modules are being developed and released in phases during the school year. And as Kelcey mentioned earlier, we'll be doing a preview of module number 1 this afternoon. And once the modules are made available online, they'll be in a format that allows in-person and online delivery of the content. The first module that we'll be previewing this afternoon is going to be the foundational module for understanding best practices and laws in student discipline. And subsequent modules will provide additional details regarding the use of discipline data, due process, and other discipline procedures. And part of the timeline with the development of training modules is to be in alignment with OSPI rulemaking that is going on currently that will significantly revise changes to the procedural aspects of student discipline. So to give you a brief overview of the timeline for the discipline training, as I mentioned, we have the Module 1 webinar today. That content will be made available online shortly after. And then we are looking for regional training opportunities to deliver the content in person. And during that time, we'll be making the content formalized into its online versions. For the discipline rules, the public comment period is currently open and will close November 13th. OSPI anticipates that the final rules will be adopted in March, and that the intent is for the rules to be effective for the start of the 18-19 school year. So in accordance with those timelines, the additional modules will be developed to align with those timelines, and again, regional opportunities and upload of content online will follow. So we anticipate all the modules will be fully available by the end of the school year, and then updated and refined in an ongoing manner to improve on the content. The content that will be reviewed this afternoon is shown on the screen there, and as I said, it provides a foundational understanding of some of the most important aspects of thinking about student discipline laws and best practices. For anyone who's interested in the current rulemaking that I mentioned, the purpose of this rulemaking is to improve clarity and readability, provide clarity around some of the requirements in House Bill 1541 that I mentioned, increase opportunities for families and parents to participate in discipline policies and in resolving discipline-related issues, as well as incorporating feedback from internal and external groups that OSPI has been eliciting feedback from, particularly the Student Discipline Task Force that was reconvened from October to January. If you're interested in providing comment or attending one of the public hearings, This is the dates for when those will be held, and more information and details about how to submit your public comment, participate in the public hearings can be found on the link at the bottom through the student discipline webpage.
All right, we're gonna take a second to do an audience poll. Feel free to type in questions in the questions box. And if you have any questions for Josh, we'll try and get those answered. For today, we're wondering about how would you describe the amount of improvement your school or district needs to fully implement the changes required under the Washington State student discipline laws? And if you'll just take a second to answer that question, we'll take a look at questions also for Josh. And it doesn't look like we have any questions this morning. Crystal clear, Josh. Well done. So as you can see there, a lot of districts are looking at some improvement. So that's good to know moving forward for you guys. Okay, so today we have with us Battleground Public Schools, and it's really cool that they're here. Battleground was chosen as a guest very purposefully, and OSPI's equity analytics, they stand out. Their numbers for suspensions and expulsions are well below the state average. So this view is from the Tableau Analytics, and this is a tool that's available to you now if you want to look at it. Also, it's on the OSPI Performance Indicators page. This is a view of their student groups, which, as you can see, that black line is the state rate, and they're well below state rate in all those categories. And here are their race groups over time. So if you look at that, all of them are dropping. It's a pretty great visual. And overall, the rates have taken an impressive dive over the last couple of years. We wanted them to come on today to talk about what they're doing to make this kind of progress. It's really impressive. And the gap between low-income students and non-low-income students is closing. So as you see there, a little bit smaller. And we have one question for Josh, it sounds like, coming in.
Josh, Mick Miller wants to know, how has WEA or teachers been represented on the work group?
Is WEA or?
WEA had a representative on the discipline task force, if that's the question. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We're lucky to be joined today by some amazing people out at Battleground Schools. Can you each take a moment to introduce yourselves and your role?
Before we do that really quick, this is Kelcey. I wanted to just do a little preview slide because what I want folks to do as they listen to Battleground is really listen for the key elements of implementing a tiered framework for behavior. So if you wanted to take a few notes and see if you hear some of these things, we want to see if we can hear about their data that they use to make decision making, their practices for supporting student behavior, and then see if we can listen for the systems for supporting staff behavior. And when they finish, we'll come back to this slide, so you'll see it again, but we wanted to give you some look-fors. Okay, I'll turn it over to Battleground.
Hi, everybody. This is Denny Waters, Deputy Superintendent for the Battleground School Districts. First of all, we'd like to thank everybody for this opportunity. We certainly appreciate it. It's a little nerve-wracking to be the center of attention, but it's been a good process for us because it's allowed us to go back and look at our journey. Sometimes it's important to look back at where you've come from because there's always a lot of work ahead of you, and that can be overwhelming. But it's nice to look back and see, hey, we have done some really good things, and we're proud of the things that we have done. I want to preface, before I introduce the rest of our team, I want to preface that we certainly don't have any magic wand. I think there are a lot of variables involved in our success. I would say some of that has to do with a little bit of luck, which we all need. Timing is right. You know, you have to have people that are ready for change. And certainly getting the right people on the bus has been big for us here in Battleground. So with that, I'd like the rest of our team to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Sandy Mathewson. My role here is the Director of Social Emotional Learning, and I work and support our counselors, our multi-teacher system of support, which in our case is PBIS implementation, mental health services throughout the district, alcohol and other drug prevention efforts, anti-bullying, suicide prevention, and the like.
I'm Tamara Sheets. I am trained as a school psychologist, but I'm currently performing the role of PBIS coach in our district.
I'm Kristen McIntyre, and also trained as a school psychologist, and have worked in the district for about 10 years, and I'm currently a PBIS coach.
So next slide. A little bit about our school district. Battleground School District is a large school district geographically, 273 square miles. It takes almost an hour to drive from the south end of our district to the north end. So we spread from a suburban school district to a very rural school district up in the north. We have over 13,000 students, 6 primary schools, 6 middle schools, 1 K-8 school, 2 comprehensive high schools, and 3 alternative schools. Some of our numbers, you can see there, 31% free and reduced. Our homelessness rate is about 2.6%, SPED rate 12.7, ELL rate 6%. Diversity, probably not as much as some other districts, but certainly is a factor and a consideration in almost everything that we do. So next slide.
So can you tell us a little bit about how you began?
Yeah, so I think it's important to look back at this journey. I was a building administrator in the district, and I moved into the SPED director role. And because of that, and if there are any SPED directors out there, you know that oftentimes we are traveling to lots of different buildings in our districts to deal with some of the most significant behavioral issues or behavioral concerns. And so I spent a lot of time at different buildings, working in all buildings. And what I noticed at that time was I saw a lot of differences in the way buildings were dealing with discipline. Some were having great success, and others it's not I could describe as great struggles. And so there was a realization on my part, I think, as I walked around and worked with building principals and worked with building staffs, that it was not a matter of skill set for the Battleground School District. It was really more so a matter of mindset. I truly believed at that time that if we could get systems in place, if we could set clear expectations for our buildings, if we could provide a level of support, and with that level of support come to expect some level of accountability, that we could change the way that we were dealing with discipline throughout the entire district. I truly believe that one of the biggest ways to do this is that you have to get people to understand the why. People need to understand why are we doing this? What are the benefits of doing this? Why is this work important? And I really do think that as a district, we have done a lot of that and been very, very successful.
This is Sandy Mathewson. So we, like Denny said, we've done a lot of thought around the why. Before I came to the district, I worked at ESD 112 for 22 years. And, oh, sorry, I'll get to the question in a second. So, and my work at ESD included really looking at building systems throughout the region. When we got to Battleground, it was very clear that there was a readiness here to work through a system, and we wanted to really look at the smallest effort to bring about the biggest benefit. And we know we didn't need a program for every problem, but a system that would really address, one system that would address that, our whole district, and build that confidence for our staff and our teachers. And so that was why. Okay, so the question on the screen, does the Director of Social Emotional Learning oversee school counselors in your district to have a counseling or psychology background? Thank you. Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Okay.
Okay, so next slide, strategic plan. So I think it's important that Battleground School District certainly made this part of who we are and what we do. We have our strategic plan, and the strategic plan has a specific goal related to safe and supportive environments that talks about, you know, school culture supports and promotes the physical, emotional, social well-being of students and staff. And under that is a lot of different, how we measure that, there's a lot of different indicators for that. But, you know, some of the indicators that we have is, you know, we have goals in the district as far as attendance. We believe we shoot for 100% of the kids being in school 90% of the time. We have goals for discipline that 90% of the students will have 0 suspensions. And we have SEL goals that, you know, 90% of the kids will feel good about being at school. And we measure that through a lot of different climate surveys and our PBIS TFI scores. We were fortunate 3 years ago that we got a new superintendent in the district who has since that time moved on, but Mark Hottaway. And Mark had a passion for SEL, social emotional learning, and he was the one who brought Sandy in, and he certainly set the stage and committed resources. And I think that is extremely important. I think Mark's emphasis when he came in was on social emotional. I don't know that he necessarily thought that there would be this expected relationship between us supporting kids social emotionally and the reduction in discipline rates and the improvement in just overall behaviors that we're seeing. But it was an unexpected and a very positive outcome. We were fortunate at the same time when Mark came into the district, we got the AWARE grant. And I'm going to let Sandy tell you a little bit about that because that was a key component.
So next slide. So when I came into the district a little over 2 years ago now, but the AWARE grant started about 3 years ago. The first year was a planning period for us. The strategic plan was in place, the leadership here, and I think it's really, really important to understand that leadership is absolutely critical to this process. But we brought in the AWARE grant, and as you can see here on the slide, there are 3 major goals within that. There's a lot of data that drives the decisions in here, and we collect data through, as Denny mentioned, a school climate survey and the healthy youth survey. The first goal there you can see was to improve school climate and safety, and the activities underneath that. The multi-tiered system of support this district is involved with is positive behaviors, interventions and supports. PBIS was that, we chose that. We also are doing the school-wide information system, SWIS, which collects data for our buildings to use. And we have an annual school climate survey you can also see there. There are additional support services happening throughout this district in addition to PBIS, and you can see those on the slide. We have mental health services. We have a mental health therapist in every building, a master's level therapist in each one of our buildings across the districts except for our ALEs. Those folks are there to assist with our Tier 3 services, but they have been here since the beginning of this grant. And we are also doing training, as you can see in the far right column, on adverse childhood experiences, trauma-informed care, and youth mental health first aid. So it's a full menu of services, but the objectives under improved school climate and safety, as you can see there, decrease bullying, increase positive school climate, and reduce suspensions and expulsions. Next slide.
Okay, so this is Tamara Sheets, one of the PBIS coaches. So let's talk about where the rubber hits the road. This is really what things look like in practice in our buildings. So first of all, as they mentioned before, the goal has, from the very first day, been about sustainability beyond the life of the grant. We know that we were very fortunate to get this grant, but we wanted to make very sure that these procedures and these policies and these practices exist well beyond the life of the grant, because it won't be here forever. The way that we did that was by creating systems that are designed to increase the sustainability of these practices. So they're not dependent on any specific person. And for each of these types of supports, for PBIS, for our prevention intervention specialists, and our mental health counseling, we use a tiered system that includes a referral process, that has decision rules and teams that are designed to look through those decision rules and filter students through them. And then they're heavily reliant on data collection to make sure that we're moving students in and out of the different interventions as the need arises or decreases. In each building, we've got a building-based team that monitors and adjusts those procedures as needed. It looks a little different in each one of our buildings because, again, we're very cognizant of the climate and the culture of each building. So those decision rules might vary slightly between buildings, but they're all designed using the same principles. And then we also have district office-based coaches or directors that support the sustainability of each of those implementation practices with all of our school teams. Let's go to the next slide.
Okay, so one of the, when I go to webinars or when I listen to webinars or go to trainings, I always think, okay, what do we do first? And so one of the things that we did when we began this work was we did a district capacity assessment. And through that, we were able to determine what do we have already in place, what do we need to do to improve our ability to take on this initiative, PBIS district-wide. And so we did that district capacity assessment, and some of the things, outcomes of that were we were able to hire 2 full-time PBIS district coaches. We also have created a district-level team that includes people from all constituents in our district, classified. We have district leadership, building leadership. So at this point in time, we have all of our schools are implementing some components of Tier 1, with half of our schools being at 80% or greater on the tiered fidelity inventory. And then we've been very intentional about doing things very slowly and well, instead of trying to get all 3 levels out at once. With PBIS, we've really started with Tier 1 because we know that if we have a solid Tier 1, then we can really support the kids who need Tier 2 and Tier 3 support. So we, at this point in time, 2 years in with district coaches, we have some of our schools are moving on to Tier 2 implementation. Obviously, you can't ignore students that are requiring Tier 3 interventions, but we don't have formal systems yet in place for schools, but we are doing functional behavioral assessments and behavior intervention plans to help support those students. We also were fortunate enough to be able to purchase an SEL curriculum, second step, for all of our K through 8 buildings and teachers, and so we are in the process of implementing that as well.
One of the things that we realized, I'm sorry, can we go back to the last slide? One of the things that we realized during our second year is that we had really been working on the how. We had really pushed the different components of the implementation of PBIS or of prevention and intervention, but we really hadn't gone to our buildings and talked about why this work is important. So this year we've really taken a step back and focused on that why. We've been thoughtful about bringing in presenters to talk about adverse childhood experiences. We've done a lot of work with our staff on how important it is to connect with students and how relationships really are key. One of our ongoing mottos is you must connect before you correct. And that's really become the heart, the why of what we do. And the why really drives the how. Okay, we can go on.
So the good news for us is that, as you saw in some of those earlier slides, we've really seen some great results, and this is one that is really meaningful to us. You could see the number of suspensions and expulsions has gone down significantly from 2014-15 to 2015-16, and we know that we've got the data for the following year, and we know that that is good as well for 2016-17. So we are very excited about that. You had asked the question earlier to people whether or not they thought that the new discipline policies would have an impact on the school district, and for us, we can truly say that it will have a minimal impact on us because of the success that we are seeing with our current system in place. So that makes us feel good about the things that we're doing.
We also, next slide, want to point out that the comprehensive nature of what we're doing is really important and very successful in our district. So we know that intervening in one area really affects other areas as well. When you do a system-wide approach, we believe, and really all means all, we're in all of our buildings with all of our staff and committed to this, that we're going to see some other really great outcomes. So if you could click on this slide, click the next, because there's some fly-in. Okay, so this is our district-wide bullying data. In addition to those suspensions and expulsions reducing, you can see the reductions we're seeing in this data as well. We collect, like I said, data two ways. One is the Healthy Youth Survey, and the other is an annual school climate survey, which is a pretty simple tool that we do each year.
Sandy talks about the other benefits that you'll see. As an ex-special ed director, I can talk a little bit about our restraint and isolation numbers. I think, and it goes hand in hand with this, because of the tiered intervention systems we've put in place, our restraint and isolation numbers have gone way down. We don't have any isolation because we eliminated isolation rooms. And I think part of that was because when we eliminated isolation rooms, we were putting these systems in place, and people felt like, okay, well, if we're going to have this kind of support, then you can go ahead and do that. So we don't have any isolation rooms in the district, but also our numbers of restraints. 3 to 5 years ago, we were averaging 150, 160 restraints a year. And last year, I think overall in a district our size, we only had 32 cases of restraint. So that's significant. So when Sandy talks about the impact of this across many different areas, those are the kinds of things that we've seen.
We've also seen some very significant reductions in alcohol and drug use across the district, and we've seen some really nice increases in our school climate data from when we started around generally students and staff across our district feeling like this is a good place to be. So we're collecting all that data and really excited about seeing those outcomes continue to improve. Next slide.
So we wanted to include for you some information about how our schools have progressed. We split up our schools into 3 different cohorts because that's really how we focused on our implementation. The early adopters are those schools that were already implementing PBIS prior to having PBIS coaches, prior to having a director of social emotional learning. These schools were doing great work, but they were operating in silos. It's before these systems were really built from a district level. But you can see that those schools were doing great work. Last year when we did their tiered fidelity inventory, which is a measure of how many components of PBIS are in place for a school, their average was 99%. And this is just the tier 1 average. We haven't done the tier 2 or tier 3 TFIs for these schools yet because they're still working on those systems. We wanted to include the percentage of students in tier 3. And the reason for that is that students in Tier 3 really require a lot of individualized and intensive support. When you're working with students at that level, it can create quite a strain on the system. And what we're really hoping to see is a reduction of the percentage of students in Tier 3 because we've caught them earlier, either through our practices in Tier 1 or Tier 2. So what you can see is our early adopters have seen a decrease in percentage. We'd really like to see that get down to about 5%. 1 to 5% is what we'd like to see there. Our Year 2 schools, or Cohort 2 schools, have shown a slight increase in students in Tier 3, and we think that that in part is because they're still building these systems, but also their data collection practices are getting better because of the work that we've done. So we feel like we anticipate to see a decrease over this next school year. Our Year 2 target schools, Cohort 3, really have started from a nice place. We've got a 72% TFI average, and 5% of students are in Tier 3. We did a lot of work up front with them on data collection practices and on mindset around why we're doing this work. So we're really thrilled to see those results there.
And we had a question from the audience. What information systems do you use to generate your data lines? Is that, I know you mentioned Swiss was one of them. What else are you guys using?
Right. So I'll start that conversation. So we are using Swiss, and obviously we're using Skyward as well. And we have been working on a data link between Swiss and Skyward so that we wouldn't have dual entry. So you could just enter the data in Skyward, and it would move over to Swiss, so you wouldn't have to use two separate systems. We are making progress in that area. I wouldn't say that it's perfect yet, but we are moving in that direction and hoping to get there eventually. In the meantime, we continue to use both systems separately.
And so to answer the next part of your question, Mick, we used the school climate survey and also the healthy youth survey to gather some of this information. You bring up a point of conversation that we're having constantly. You're right, this is a huge change for those teachers who want to use the hammer. And we still have groups of teachers who fall into that category. And really the information from the school climate survey, from the staff responses, is what drove our decision to really step back and focus on the why this year. We felt like it was really important to reach out to that group and to really challenge the mindset of punishment versus meaningful consequences. It's a work in progress.
And Mick, you also asked about WEA or teachers. Is that to us, or that was from the other one? Okay. I would say that for our work that we are doing, we have teachers involved in every aspect, and we even have our union president who sits on our PBIS work group. So
we also this year are we have what's called K-12 meetings where it's all administrators, including district office administrators and building principals and assistant principals. And the focus this year for that work is around this issue of social emotional learning and the why. And we're really intentional about giving information to the folks who are in our building leadership around this and asking hard questions, honestly, about what do folks think and how can we address those as we move forward. So it's interesting and challenging, but we believe at a very solid level that the work we're doing is what we need to be doing. So hopefully that's helpful. Next slide.
Yep. Becky Thomas was actually also wondering if we can share a copy of your annual school climate survey. Do you guys have a copy you could share?
Sure. We work with an evaluator named Michelle Mikey, and the school climate survey that we're using, I can't remember the name of it, but it is a nationally recognized tool. So sure, we'll get that for you.
Sandy, is it the Delaware survey?
You know, I don't want to say yes when I don't have it in front of me and I can't remember, but I can't remember, Dix, but I'll make sure you know.
Thanks, Sandy.
Yeah.
Okay, so on this next slide, I think this is a great example of helping a large system like a high school. So this is one of our high schools that has over 2,000 students. And one thing that they really did this year is they focused on discipline procedures and looking at, you know, teachers need to be the first line of defense when students misbehave or have, you know, a behavior error, as we like to say. And so what they did at Battleground High School is they created a new discipline procedure. And just by doing something like this changes the conversation, because it becomes with the teacher and the student having that relationship and trying to correct those errors initially and making sure that it's not, you didn't bring a pencil, you need to go down to the office or the, you know, ISS room or whatever. And so this has really changed. We've seen a huge change in Battleground High School's data in how they're interacting with students, because it requires that teacher to have those conversations, to have parent contact, to have those things done prior to a student just being sent down to the office. And I don't know about your districts, but when we first began this work, when I first came to this district 10 years ago, I had lines of kids outside of my office because they were misbehaving in classrooms, and teachers didn't feel like they could intervene with those students. And really what we're doing now is we're giving that power back to the teachers and giving them strategies on what can you do in the classroom with that student to maintain that relationship, but ultimately to change that behavior.
One of the other things that we really examined, especially at our high schools, is through our first year of data collection, we noticed that the discipline data was exceptionally high for 3 areas. One was PE non-suits, one was cell phone infractions, and then a combination of gum chewing and hat wearing. And,
serious stuff.
Yeah, real serious stuff. So we started having conversations with the admin teams and the student support teams at those schools around, you know, how can we reframe our thinking around this so that we're not just writing students up and, you know, giving consequences that obviously aren't changing the behavior for these little things, and instead really focus on how to change the behavior. So our schools have come up with some great strategies for this. I won't go into them, but one of our schools has what they call a cell phone jail, which involves the cell phones just not being out, and it's just not a question. So it's a nice way to exemplify that we looked at the data and figured out how to make a change in our practices that it just wasn't making sense before. So
again, going with the making smaller changes, getting a lot of feedback from people and their buy-in, but also that has the biggest bang for what we're trying to do in this system we're working on. Okay, next slide. So,
advice to starting this work. Again, certainly there is no magic wand associated with this, but I would say one of the things, and I think we've emphasized this a number of times, is to go slow and build a good system. People get frustrated with slow, but slow and steady is certainly the way to go. We did make some missteps. I think when we first rolled this out, we tried to go a little bit too fast, and then realized that if we went too fast, the frustration level would even be higher because they weren't able to keep up. And so we slowed down and reconfigured kind of the things that we wanted to do. So that's critical. I think another thing is that you have to have the leadership in place, because you have to have people that can make the decisions. And if you don't have that, it's an uphill climb. We were fortunate. We had a superintendent who got us started. We have a new superintendent who is just as much on board. I've been fortunate to be moving into this position, which has allowed me to continue my passion for this work. I also think that even though you have to be careful with this, I think people are looking for direction, and they want to know that this is what the district wants and this is what the district believes. And I think that starts with the district strategic plan And you have to have that as part of it, and people need to know that it's a very important component and that you're going to be working on it and you're going to hold people accountable to it.
Other things that we've done is we've made sure to build relationships with all of our groups. This includes bus drivers who we contract with our bus company, so they are not district employees, but we have done numerous trainings and have met with them on several occasions to provide support and get them on board with kind of what we're doing as well. We have input from our classified staff, our teachers union. So it's just really important that you build your relationships with all those stakeholders. And then to also consider the politics in your district. You know, how you roll this out is very important. Denny mentioned leadership. And one of the things within our district is things were very grassroots, right? So it kind of was from the ground up. And we did really good things in silos. But one of the things that we had to change is that kind of, we had to have strong leadership to say, this is the direction we're going and this is what we're doing. And that worked for us. It may not work for everybody, but that's what we needed to kind of move this work forward systemically.
Mm-hmm. To add to that, I would talk about, it's really important, I feel like, to have a planning year. I feel like it's important to start with those key people, have those conversations and talk about, gosh, like what components do we need to put in place to really roll this out in a way that is sustainable and that will work for our district, because, you know, every district is different. You've got to take into consideration the politics that Kristen talked about. You need to consider the climate and culture of your buildings. So picking those people and having those conversations, and then just starting. I mean, you know, at some point, it's important just to, you know, instead of dipping your toe in the water, just jump in and start, you know, pulling things together and having those conversations.
Okay, this is Sandy. There's some things I say all the time, and I'm just a broken record, but one thing that is really, really important is to have solid environmental strategies. Policy and procedure drive everything. Within coming to the district, we've made some key policy changes, and I know that isn't the most exciting work sometimes, but it's really critical. Another thing that we are very, very lucky here, we have the best staff, teachers, psychs, nurses, counselors, and community members in the state. We do. This is the best place to work on the planet. And one of the things we try to say over and over again is how wonderful they are, because we mean it, and how caring about children and all meaning all is really it. We know that sustainability starts day one, that when I walked in the door, and I am fortunate to have a lot of experience with grants. One of the biggest things that I've learned over the years is you must start sustainability from the first day. Thinking ahead when you start planning and going slow, how will this look in 10 years? And how can it still be this way when I am no longer here and retired and living on a beach in Hawaii? How can this happen? And really keeping that sustainability in the forefront of what we're doing.
Like we have a question about Ross Green's collaborative and proactive solutions. I'm actually not familiar with this problem-solving model.
We have schools that, especially in our special ed staff, that are familiar with Ross Green's work, but it is not part of our system currently. We have, again, people who have a little bit of background in it, but.
Okay, and one more thing, it is the Delaware survey, the University of Delaware School Climate Survey. I checked. Okay, next slide.
All right. Okay, well, we would like to take a moment to reflect after hearing all this great information. What's one major takeaway you have from Battleground's experience? We want to see what you're thinking, so if you're feeling brave, you can type that into the chat to share. Also, if you have questions for Battleground, don't be shy about using that questions box. And we'll just give you a minute to think.
Hi, Marilee Hill Anderson. Oh, I was going to answer the question about specific policies. This is an okay time. Kathy, is that all right?
Yeah, feel free, Sandy.
Okay, one of the things our district did not have when we first got here was a suicide prevention policy that was in place that followed the state recommendations. So we worked really hard as a team on that. That isn't this PBIS work, but that policy really drove. We had a work group of counselors, psychs, nurses that for a year really looked at what we needed to do in terms of connecting with our most risk-involved children and putting together forms that we follow and a policy that also included training, annual training to all of our staff every year on suicide prevention, and that's been really, really critical. We also have, and not so much as a formal policy, but more around the lines of engagement and voice. We have, the grant has something called the core management team that meets quarterly, and that includes people from our community, students. The way we get student voice on that is every quarter we ask different buildings to send groups of children who are doing amazing things, and they have a conversation with the core management team, including our superintendent, the chief of police, the head of our union, et cetera, et cetera. So those are just two things I can talk about right off the cuff.
Thanks, Sandy. I think we're gonna get going. We're running out of time, and we're gonna give Kelcey some time to share some cool resources with you guys. So if some thoughts come to you, feel free to add them in the chat just so people can see what you're thinking. And we'll grab questions one last time before we end, but we'll give Kelcey a chance here.
Yeah, just really quick to kind of bookend things. First of all, thank you to Battleground School District for sharing their work. I know when you're in the day in, day out of the grind, you don't stop and take stock of all the work that you've done and the great outcomes that you're having. So I showed this slide before they got started, and I just wanted to bring us back to it. And I promise, and they can attest to this as well. They didn't see this slide. They had actually sent their slides in before we added this one. And I think I heard Denny say, and we do know there is no magic wand or fairy dust for making this happen, but we have school districts in the state, across the nation, like Battleground, and researchers that are really telling us what those key components are to making it work. So I know that I jotted down many things that I heard. I heard them talk about their outcomes, their goals and objectives. I heard them talk about their data using SWIS and seeing decreases in suspensions, expulsions, restraint and isolation. Using their fidelity tools. Did we do it? Are we doing it as it was intended? Using that tiered fidelity inventory, looking at their healthy use survey data, their school climate data. I also heard them talk a little bit about progress monitoring. And really they emphasized that their systems building. I heard them talk about how they were doing many, many good things well in silos, and really from the district showing how these things all fit together, and that we don't need a program for every problem. Some of these practices have impacts and effects in other areas, which they saw. I heard them mention sustainability quite a bit, and starting with an eye towards sustainability. I heard leadership and a team approach. I also heard them talk about training and coaching. So thank you all for sharing all of those things. We know that these things are all supported by an MTSS framework, and MTSS is something that's been around in Washington for quite some time. Schools are implementing a variety of multi-tiered systems. And as Battleground and others are learning that in order to be more effective and efficient, they're aligning those things. As an MTSS advisory committee at the state level, the last year we've been working on what are some of those components. So you'll see what just popped up on the right-hand side are the components of MTSS Framework. Those that I'm sure you've already heard Battleground address in their presentation. Sometimes folks say we can't do MTSS because we've got too much on the plate, and I think Battleground and other school districts would say, but MTSS is the plate. It really is how we organize all of our resources, how we improve the quality of supports for our students in schools. Oops, didn't mean to do that. This is just another example. I think graphic representations are always helpful. A school on the East Side Central Valley School District really is showing visually how they are organizing all the things they're doing under the umbrella of a multi-tiered system. Josh talked a little about 1541, and one of those recommendations was the creation of the Washington Integrated Student Supports Protocol, and that's something the Center for the Improvement of Student Learning, my area, has been working really hard on the past year, and that's something that we will have, we'll be able to release very soon, hopefully in the next week or so. And might just be an additional resource for those of you building systems to support students, and especially expanding those resources and connecting with community partners and families. So I'm getting a little bit into Josh's area, but I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about practices. The state has menus of best practices for ELA, math, and behavior. And if you'll notice on the right side, that breaks down the behavior menu. So this is something that's been created and worked on for three years. Is this the third year of the menus?
Fourth year.
Fourth year.
Third year for the behavior and math.
Okay, fourth year for ELA, third year for behavior and math. But these are really excellent resources where you can find evidence-based practices. The LAP team also does menu implementation workshops, so you have their contact information there if that's something you are interested in. And this just lists out what those practices and strategies are. They use a panel of experts to review practices and strategies. So this menu should be a really good resource for you as you're trying to identify practices to implement. This is just a few other resources where you can find some evidence-based practices. And I'm going to keep moving, but you guys can come back to this as a resource. Again, data, so increasing the precision of decision-making, which you heard Battleground is doing really well. So those are just some resources to consider using for data. Some you're probably already using, some you may not be using, and then taking a look at what your existing data sources are to make decisions. The MTSS resource page on our OSPI website has been undergoing some significant updates. We're trying to keep it very current, and you'll see under resource what those headers are. So we hope that you'll find this helpful as you're building your multi-tiered system. And I just want to end with a conference that's going to happen pretty near to us in March. The Association for Positive Behavior Support Conference is in San Diego this year, March 28th through the 31st. And with that, I'll turn it over to Kathy.
So we're trying to improve our performance, and in an effort to capture your comments over time, we've created a quick survey. So please help us by taking a minute to fill it out. If the webinar closes out, this link's also available in our Zoom reminders, so you can always let us know your thoughts. We appreciate our audience, and we want to improve this experience for everybody. So this link is in the chat if you want to click on it. Next month, we'll be talking about 9th grade success, and that's November 8th. And we'll be here at 10 o'clock. Thank you so much to all of our presenters for making this a really great experience for everybody. And we're so glad to have such knowledgeable people to work with. It's a real joy. Have a great day. Bye.